and we're live. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. My name is Juras. As every week, I'm joined by Glenn Highcove, who is joining me all the way from California, man. How is your week looking like, and are you excited for this week's case?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Just been staying pretty busy. We've had some pretty hot weather out here where I live in California, and we're also coming up on a holiday weekend at the time of recording. So it's we're definitely getting into the heart of summer.
Excellent. So this week, we're going to be talking about the Walker County Jane Doe case. So it's an unidentified female case. Now, a quick little backstory on this case. I'll just read this off of the Wikipedia, and then we can jump to our notes and go through the timeline. So, the Walker County Jane Doe is the name given to an unidentified murder victim and a victim of an unsolved crime whose body was discovered on November 1st, 1980 in Huntsville, Texas. She was aged between 14 and 20 at the time of her death, and her body was discovered within hours of her sexual assault and murder. Despite initial efforts to discover both her identity and that of her murderer's identity as well, the investigation into Walker County Jane Doe's murder gradually became a cold case. Nonetheless, the case remains open, and numerous efforts have been made to determine the identity of the descendant, including several forensic facial reconstructions of how she may have appeared in life. The unidentified decedent became known as Walker County Jane Doe due to the county in which her body was discovered and where she was later buried in a donated casket. Okay, so this is a very interesting case and a very sad case. As I've been researching, I kind of felt really bad for this whole case, mainly because, I think I have it here. I want to bring it up in the visual assets here. If you could look, this is the casket. This is the tombstone of the woman, the unidentified female that we're going to be talking about in this case. And on her tombstone, it says unknown white female died on November 1st, 1980. And I feel like it's kind of sad, wouldn't you agree? Like, to not really have closure. And when you see the tombstone, it kind of gives me like the urge to really try to solve it. Obviously, I can't do it by myself. Maybe someone in the community can, because we might pose some questions and maybe a miracle will happen and one of our audience members will know who this woman is. But like, just looking at the tombstone, doesn't this kind of make you a little bit sad?
Yeah, definitely. It seems so odd that, especially in a place that has all this tracking, social security numbers and your government IDs, and you know, let alone the people that might love you or take care of you or your friends, and then to end up like this is really just grim.
Exactly. All right, so I think we definitely can jump through the timeline that I have here and the most interesting points. So without any further ado, I guess I'll just go through the little timeline that I have like conspected in my notes. So I want to start off with just the whole event. So her nude body, because she was naked, was found on November 1st, 1980 alongside Interstate 45 by a trucker. Now, the victim wore only a necklace, and a pair of red sandals were discarded nearby. So I quickly want to jump to the Google Earth for everyone who is watching this on the YouTube channel or might want to know the general location. So everything is happening in Texas. I would say definitely in the western part of Texas, in around a fairly small, I would say, town of Huntsville. And yep, her body was found around in this location to the right side of the Interstate 45. So I quickly want to also jump to the street view, just to give a better look at where her body was found. Now, I think her body was kind of dumped somewhere around this area. So it's probably just to get this question off the bat, it's most likely a situation where someone, potentially kidnapped the woman, or she came under the culprits or multiple culprits' possession, and they killed her somewhere else, but they dumped her body as they were driving along the interstate, and they were driving, I guess, in that direction, but they just dumped her body somewhere alongside the road. Wouldn't you agree that that's the case, that she definitely wasn't murdered here? I mean, that's usually how these situations play out when victims are found alongside, I guess, interstate highways, right?
Yeah, it seems like a really, I mean, I'll just say it, it would have to be a really stupid murderer to do it there, just because there's like traffic coming by. It's an interstate, so it's where a lot of the truck traffic, um, bringing goods from state to state, is coming through. It would be a really easy way to get caught, versus, like you said, just doing it some other place and then using this place to dump and move.
You're right. Now, the victim had been beaten severely and strangled with the pantyhose, which were lodged into her vaginal cavity. She had been sexually assaulted in both lower body cavities with a blunt object, and this is an interesting point to some people. It is unknown if she was conventionally raped, as no biological evidence was recovered. Now, immediately, I just want to ask you a question. Maybe you will have more information on this. Now, this is happening back in 1980. So DNA didn't really come into fruition, I think, until the 90s, let's say generally. Widespread DNA in law enforcement, I guess, investigations. So this is 1980. My question is, they in 1980 they don't find any biological evidence, like any semen or anything like that, but let's say, is there a chance that they may have missed something because it's the 80s?
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, it is true that they would not have been able to find maybe some of the very fine features of, and by fine I mean like tiny, right? So the very small samples and things that they're able to test for now, or even like you said, 20 years ago in the 90s, when DNA evidence came into kind of like its mature period. But I will say that there has been for a really long time, for decades, attention to what tiny details they could get. So whether it was scratches or things like pubic hairs, let's say, from, bodies touching each other, right? Point of contact. And I think they could still look for things like traces of semen. It's interesting because I'm doing a little research while we're talking about this, and it looks like the first uh, some of the first rape kits happened to look like, or were developed in the late 70s. So it is possible that the local law enforcement there didn't have kind of the latest and greatest in crime technology, but I do think there were some established ways. I mean, historically, not even just for crime, there are cultural reasons why sometimes people would check, let's say, women and men for sexual contact. Um, Not even just criminal, but like kind of cultural mores and whether you were supposed to have had contact or not. So, yeah, it is a good point, though. I think it is interesting that this is one of the things that comes up again and again in the descriptions, of this particular crime is that, you know what I mean? It's always
Yeah.
accentuated. There's this like uncertainty about whether there was a, let's, what they call a conventional rape, so genital to genital rape. And I think it's interesting. I'll stick a pin in this for now. I might have a little more about this point later.
Excellent. Let's move on to another really disturbing detail that was, also part on the victim's body, and that was a deep bite mark on one of her shoulders. So, a deep bite mark, a human bite mark, by the way, not an animal's, like a human bit her on one of the shoulders. So, I'm kind of thinking to myself, there's a lot of like, how should I put it? Like, biologically, there's human on human uh, things being done here, like biting someone's shoulder. That's kind of, it would lead me to believe that this person would probably be inclined to do the conventional rape as well. Wouldn't you agree? Because it's like you're already like kind of invested in abusing and torturing this poor woman, but then you don't really, or maybe not, or maybe it's like a torture, maybe it's part of the torture, maybe the gratification here is not like the sexual release of your own, uh I guess, I don't know, body parts or whatever, but like it's the torture of the victim. Is that what's happening here?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's interesting because it wasn't until just now when you described it again, it really occurred to me. I was like, oh wow, this must have been a really hard bite. You know what I mean? Because people like leave hickeys and stuff on each other, and to bite into something or a person to the point where they could actually recognize your dentition. You know what I mean? So like the pattern of your teeth. That must have been a really, like you said, almost like a torture or like a really aggressive act. Now, in terms of, it's like, well, they did this thing, why wouldn't they do the other thing? One interesting thing, I ran into this before. It was talking about somebody who'd done assaults like this, and it was a man, and he had, assaulted two teenage girls. But the interesting thing was he didn't use his own, let's say, genitals in the crime because he was physically unable to. So he had some kind of like medical issue that was preventing him, and that's something to consider. Is the person might be doing it not necessarily out of like pure, let's say, sexual gratification. There may be many motives for why they're doing it, but it's interesting to think that, like, especially, like especially back then, this is before Viagra and all these other things that might help somebody who had like erectile dysfunction. I know we're getting pretty clinical in this episode today, so this might not be monetized. But yeah, I mean, it is worth mentioning that, like, as men get older, they have hormonal issues on top of whatever health issue somebody might have, and that might be actually part of their frustration and why they're doing some of this awful stuff to women or young ladies. Is that they're kind of mad at themselves and mad at their bodies. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes actual good sense. Now, during her autopsy, it was determined that she was likely from a middle class household. Now, why is that? Is because she was not malnourished, and as well, she had excellent dental health. So, a few interesting details. I guess, I don't know. Well, this right now, currently, to the audience members who have not really heard about this case before, maybe this information doesn't really make sense. So let's just keep it in mind that she apparently was from a middle class family, or at least, she wasn't malnourished. She wasn't, it wasn't like she was, it didn't seem that she was living a very hard life. Well, her life must have been difficult lately, and we'll talk about why. But just in general, she wasn't coming from like a impoverished background, I would assume. Now we're gonna return to this, but the other thing I have in my points is that early on in the investigation, Henry Lee Lucas was considered a possible suspect in the Walker County Jane Doe's case. However, bite marks on the Walker County Jane Doe uh, did not match Henry Lee Lucas. I guess you know his like mouth, his the form of his bite. It didn't match. So two questions here: um, is this a is are we completely disregarding Henry Lee Lucas? And then another question is Henry Lee Lucas like a really known serial killer? I mean, I know he confessed to a lot of killings, but on your end, have you heard a lot about Henry Lee Lucas? Because I feel like it's not the first time we're mentioning this guy. I think he came up like before for sure.
Yeah, now I wish there was an easy way for us to kind of word search our past shows, because I feel like he must have come up because we've overlapped with this area. And yeah, his name came up a lot in the research for this, because like he was apparently just such a notoriously prolific serial killer who had teamed at one point teamed up, I think, with another serial killer. Um, and
Wow.
because of this, yeah, because of that, and because he was known to really get around. So I think it was just like it was like a person that if it wasn't him, it might have been someone like him
Mm,
who potentially did this all the time, and who was very mobile, and kind of utilized a truck or a car
mm,
as transportation to facilitate doing things like this a lot. But yeah, to your point, so the thing you're describing, when they don't match the teeth, that's what I mean by dentition.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, his dentition. By the way, if you see a picture of him, I mean, he's got a mouth like a piano missing a bunch of keys. I mean, his mouth is really distinct. I mean, I didn't look into him
Mm-hmm.
that much, but it sounds like it was somebody that had a pretty hard life, um, and he looked like it. I mean, I think he was like maybe blind in one eye and he was missing a bunch of teeth. So I think it was like, yeah, if he'd done it, it would have very had a very distinct look to it, and I don't think it at all matched him.
Okay, so I want to quickly bring it back to you. I'm curious. Well, I guess you all kind of answered it. I will have another convicted counterfeiter and a serial rapist and potentially a serial killer. Well, a killer, but we're not sure if he's a serial killer because only one kill is, connect like has been proven that he did it. So that's coming up. That's just a little extra research that I did before the show. I found an interesting character. We will discuss if he could be potentially connected later on the show. But just to clarify, I didn't really want to focus on Henry Lee Lucas anymore because it seems like the guy had confessed to a lot of murders that were proven that he did not do those murders. Then he didn't confess to some that apparently were accounted as his doing. So just to clarify on the Henry Lee Lucas, just because of the dentistry, I think we don't real dentition. I mean, just according to the dentition, we don't believe that Henry Lee Lucas was the culprit here because I feel like if the bite marks doesn't match, well, I mean, he could have been a part of it. You know what I mean? We don't know how many people were involved, but at least Henry Lee Lucas definitely did not leave that bite mark, right?
Yeah, I agree. And to your point, he had he's it's not like he ever would have been trustworthy. And I actually, while we were talking, I looked up his life, and I mean, his whole life is a train wreck. But much like a lot of serial killers, once he got in prison, he started trying to claim murders that weren't his. Um,
Yeah.
for some of the reasons we talked about in past episodes, that sometimes that's just the only way guys like this exert power over other people when once they're in prison and they're powerless to do other things. So yeah, I mean, you're right though. It doesn't. If there was like a kind of a conspiracy, like him teaming up with somebody, more than one person, then yeah, then maybe it's possible. But so far, there's not a lot of clues, period, in this case. But there's not any evidence that more than one person did this.
Exactly. One investigator actually suggested that the victim may have been murdered by a woman because no bodily fluids were found. The victim was raped with a blunt object, um, and had a bite mark in the shoulder. And now this investigator from back in the day, I don't recall who this person was, they claimed that a bite mark to the shoulder is not the most typical place for a rapist, a male avid rapist, to leave his bite mark. The bite marks would be more around the more sensual, more intimate areas, not the shoulder. So do you? I found it a weak. I just want to, before I ask you this question, I found this line of thinking weak, as it I don't know why this person may, like, I'm not discounting that this could have been a woman who did the murder. Of course, that's of course possible, but like, this doesn't make me lean towards that this was a woman. I'm still heavily leaning towards, if I had to bet, I would bet that this was a man killing this poor little girl. Well, not little girl, in her late teens, I would say, but still, I would say it was a man, and just the fact that the bite mark was on the shoulder and there were no bodily fluids, this doesn't necessarily, to me, scream female murderer. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with you. To me, the because yeah, it's funny. This came up specifically on Stephanie Harlow's show, which, by the way, she has an excellent show on this topic. It was part of my research. I really enjoyed it, and I think some of the theories I'm going to talk about tonight came directly from her show and her discussing it and me having a time to think about it. But yeah, for that, I don't buy that at all. I mean, I'm trying to think how to phrase this right. I could definitely see somebody biting on the shoulder or anywhere else, um, in the middle of them doing whatever they're doing. And I'll go even further than you. I'll say that not only do I not think that it was necessarily means it was a woman. I don't think a woman did this. I actually, I've seen enough like videos of assaults and fights and things like that. And while I've definitely seen women who can handle themselves and deal damage, I feel like this kind of beating the death of a woman, I feel like to me, it's more emblematic of something a man would do. And also just from the capabilities perspective, even some of the strongest women I've seen, just don't compare with the kind of physical damage that most men can do with their bare hands.
Yeah, I mean, that's just nature, I guess. And yeah, you were right. Now thinking back about how she was killed, how the autopsy results came in, and she was apparently strangled. Well, that's a lot of strength right there, and blunt forced trauma to the head. That's a lot. So let's keep moving. Now we're finally arriving at the backstory of this girl. Now, if this was just a story like this, without any witnesses, without anyone even knowing about who this woman may potentially be, I'm talking about the victim in this case, the Walker County Jane Doe. This case would not have been as famous as it is right now, because it has to be one of the most famous Walker County, Jane Doe cases in America. And this is why, because there were multiple witnesses who strongly believe, and some sources state that this is 100% connected, some that it only says it was believed that she was spotted by these witnesses, but I believe she was definitely spotted. and it may have been already proved that what the witnesses saw was exactly this Jane Doe. So the day before she was found murdered, witnesses from a gas station and another truck stop station came forward. Well, not the day before, obviously, but after her body was found, the police went to the media, and the case has been highly publicized. And now two separate witnesses from two separate locations from the town of Huntsville, because her body was found only 2 miles away from Huntsville. So, two different witnesses from Huntsville came out, and I have pinpointed the locations of in Huntsville on the map here, where they allegedly saw the Walker County Jane Doe. Now, it's unfortunate that none of them asked for her name or some sort of initials or anything like that. Well, it kind of makes sense because apparently in both of these cases, the Walker County Jane Doe came up to the witnesses and asked for directions to a local prison because she was apparently going to see her friend in a prison. I have the prison as well on the map, but before we jump to that, because this is gonna get really crazy really soon, I want to go one by one through my list here. So let me just quickly see. All right, so as I've said, witnesses from a gas station and a truck stop came forward. They identified the deceased woman as a girl who was asking them for directions to the Ellis Prison Unit. To the best of their recollection, she had been let out of a 1973 or a 1974 blue Chevrolet with a lighter colored top, possibly a Caprice, which was being driven by a white male. Okay, white male. So just to put this in perspective, this I believe. Okay, so the way in my notes it's worded, it's a little bit weird. Now, quickly on the map, just to set the scene, we have the location of Shelf Gulf gas station. Now, mind you guys, this map is from like recent times, and this case is happening 40 years ago. Now, I went back to do the historical imagery, and the Sam Houston Avenue where this gas station is located, it's kind of the same. The layout is kind of the same. Just the outskirts of Huntsville, they definitely got more infrastructure over the last 40 years, but I'd say the heart of the town kind of stayed the same. So from what I've gathered, and this is the best way I could have put together the whole scenario in my head, because it was kind of difficult to pinpoint to which of these locations she was dropped off by this white male driving that blue Caprice. Now, I think she definitely was dropped off at this particular Shelf Gulf gas station, and I will tell you why. Now, obviously, back in the day, this was probably not Shelf Gulf gas station, or maybe it was. I want to quickly jump to the street view. So, to set the stage, there's some employees at the gas station. A blue Caprice driven by a white male stops at the gas station. Outside, out of that Caprice, the Walker County Jane Doe walks out. Now, I think she was mentioned that she was disheveled, and she looked like she may have been sleeping in her clothes for a while now, and that she was actively hitchhiking. Now, that's the backstory of what the gas station employee, the witness, recalled when they came forward with this new information. And now, apparently, the Jane County, though, asked for directions to a prison called the Ellis Unit, which is just quickly on the map. So if this is the Shelf Gulf gas station, the Ellis Unit is a little bit down the line to the north. So just in general, dude, your opinion on what's happening, because I don't want to move too far into the story. I want to stay right here so that the audience members wouldn't get lost and ourselves as well, obviously. So, a white male drives a Caprice, lets out the Jane Doe, and she asks, "How do I get to a prison?" My initial thoughts before you give your take is the white male, in my opinion, I kind of lean towards wasn't connected to her murders. I feel like the blue Caprice isn't connected to the murder. I kind of strongly feel that the white male driving the blue Caprice was just one of many potential people who have been giving the Jane Doe lifts, you know what I mean? Over the last few days, maybe, as she was trying to get to the prison. Maybe the man driving the blue Caprice, he met the Jane Doe somewhere near, potentially, or I don't know where they met, but he told the Jane Doe that he was heading towards Huntsville, and that just north of Huntsville, there is, the Ellis unit, the prison unit. So maybe he drove her to the gas station and was like, okay, I'm actually driving now down west. I'm not driving to the north. This is as far as I can take you. Take care and be safe. And then drove off. So my initial thoughts that the driver of this Caprice was not linked to the murders. However, it's strange that he never came forward as well. So this is where I'll leave it at. And what are your opinions regarding where we are at the story right now?
Yeah, it's funny you took the words right out of my mouth. I was just going to ask you if you thought that really they were just looking for this person because this person maybe could help them fill in some of the missing pieces of the puzzle. But yeah, I mean, just given the chronology, it doesn't really seem like they are a suspect. Otherwise, how would anybody have even gotten a chance to talk to our Jane Doe? But yeah, I think that's all I got at this point.
Right. So as I've said, she notably seemed to be disheveled, like she had been traveling and perhaps sleeping in her clothes. Now she left the station, walking north on Sam Houston Avenue. Okay, so this is the station. This is the Sam Houston Avenue. I think it says here. Nah, it says it's some sort of different avenue, but this is Sam Houston Avenue. And she was walking north. So if we would just straighten out the map and if we follow the northern direction, eventually, well, not eventually, there's kind of a long walk, but then she was later spotted in the Hitchin Post truck terminal, which is just for the audience members who are not looking at the visuals and are listening to this on the podcast apps. Now, this other location, the Hitch and Post truck terminal, it's basically where trucks stop, and it's actually right next to the Interstate 45. So it's literally like, I want to quickly measure this. Yep, in miles, I would assume. Nope, this is not miles. Let me just check miles. Just want to make sure I know that. Okay, so it's actually quite a lot. It says 3.5 miles. Okay, so from this Hitcham Post truck station, if you just take the interstate, drive for 3.5 miles, this is where her body was found later on. So now she goes there, and she once again asks for instructions how to get to the prison. So from this, I'm gathering she may have gotten some sort of instructions. Apparently, she also had a map. Now, I didn't really get looked into too much into that whole situation. Apparently, she had some sort of a rough map of where she's supposed to be going. And if we would look at the map, she was kind of making progress until she maybe didn't take uh, the route a little bit more to the northeast, but she took the route a little bit more to the northwest, if that makes sense. And she apparently somehow got herself to the hitch and post terminal. So she maybe didn't really go exactly to where she was intending to go. Maybe that's why she asked for instructions again. I don't really have the distinct differences between the two victim sightings. It was actually quite hard to clarify which location she was at first. I still believe for sure that she went to the hitch and post later on. As it correlates with her walking north past Sam Houston Avenue. So yeah, dude, anything you want to add regarding this second location where she was witnessed? Because I don't really, in my notes, I don't really have any clear distinctions between the two witnesses. Both claimed that the girl asked for instructions to go to the prison. That's all I have.
Yeah, I was curious. I was just as an aside, do like all this truck stop stuff and kind of infrastructure around trucks, is it the same where you live in Lithuania? I mean, I mean, part of me wonders if just the whole, the whole world truck stops and trucks and stuff are all the same, but I don't know how much of this is like a uniquely US experience.
Um, Yeah, we do have a lot of trucks, especially here in Lithuania. I think per capita there's like more trucking being done than probably anywhere in Europe, and mostly we just get the immigrant workers from like Kazakhstan or whatever. So like we have a lot of truck drivers, but only 10% I believe are like Lithuanians, and all of them like come from like really poor uh, Central Asian countries, and they're treated really poorly as well here. Like these, like Lithuanians steal their passports, make them like live like in super small rooms, like six of them. It's almost reminiscent of like slave workers, kind of in like the maybe the Arabic countries, if you know what I mean, where it's like protested that there's like a lot of human exploitation. So yeah, in Lithuania the trucking industry is like really massive for some reason. I don't really know why, but there's a lot of like exploitation, and there's a lot of infrastructure as well. So yeah, you will see like truck stocks as well, but I think it's distinctly Lithuanian, maybe because we're in a good geographical position for these trucking enterprises, but it's not. I would say definitely in the more western parts of Europe, you will not find as many of these infrastructures.
Okay, I was just kind of curious because in America, there's like a little bit of, it's kind of hard to describe, but there's a little bit of kind of cultural romance around the trucking industry because trucking is really important. The open road and all that became kind of a distinctly important part of American culture, and so there was a little bit of like kind of working class hero stuff around truckers, and it's for it's still like viewed as a respectable job. It isn't as lucrative for sure as it used to be. Um, but there's like like truck stops and diners and stuff, and it's kind of like the truckers kind of like almost part of the cultural landscape, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
It's it's also a tough job. I mean, truckers are thought to be kind of tough guys because it's a kind of a physical job
yeah,
as well, the
for
lash
sure,
down. And
of
yeah, I
course.
don't know. I just was kind of curious because I mean, it's been a while since I've been around like a truck stop or anything like that. It's also interesting that like I guess this factors into this. Truck stops can be a lot of things. So a truck stop will be a restaurant. You might have showers there or some kind of like facilities that are a little better than what the person's been using around their truck, or like a rest stop. Um, and almost always, besides the gas station and maybe a weigh station, because you have to weigh your truck to make sure it meets like certain requirements for maximum weight, or you could like break your truck, cause an accident. There's also a place to park it and sleep. So a lot of trucks have like, especially these over the road, like long haul truckers, have what's called sleeper cabs. So I know this is going to factor into this case a little bit as far as suspects, because you're like, well, where is Jane Doe sleeping? And like they said, it kind of looks like she's been sleeping in her clothes. Well, if you're hitchhiking, maybe you can sleep in the car, like on the way there, place to place. But like, some random person that's driving from their house to the store or from one part of the state to the other, like they're not sleeping in their car. So,
For sure.
where was she sleeping? And then, I think what's really excellent so far is that you have shown on the map something that I haven't seen on anyone else's um, show on YouTube about this, was actually connecting the proximity of, where her body was found to this trucking infrastructure. And it kind of draws a dotted line into like possibilities of, what happened between when she was last seen alive and then, where she was
Yes,
found. And yeah, so,
for
okay, so
sure.
far so good.
Yeah, for sure, man. Let's move a little bit into some interesting details of the investigation, what they did to try to identify this dead woman found alongside Interstate 45 the following day after all of these witnesses apparently saw her asking for questions about how to get to the prison. So, quickly jumping to the prison. Now, this is a really smart move and a really interesting move, and just without stopping here for too long. So, she was going to TDCJ Ellis Unit, some sort of a prison facility. Now, I want to quickly jump to it on the street view. We can't really get to it because the Google Earth car wasn't allowed in the premises, but this is the Ellis unit. And now, every single prisoner in this Ellis unit, and staff members as well, have been shown the post-mortem pictures, where the woman has passed away, uh, and none of them, none of the staff members, none of the inmates could identify her or said that they were familiar with the Jane Doe. So now I want to quickly bring up the pictures. These are some pretty graphic pictures, so viewer discretion is advised for everyone who's on YouTube. But maybe this is also gonna play into what we're trying to research here a little bit. So these are the pictures. These are the two pictures I'm referring to now. So these two pictures were shown to the inmates. None of the inmates could identify this woman. So immediately, two questions in my head: is someone in that prison aware of who this woman is and don't want to identify them, as it will mess up their potential prison sentence that's maybe gonna, run out in like a few years and they'll be a free man. So they're like, I don't want to even be associated with this dead woman. Or is the victim's pictures really hard? The I mean, what I'm trying to say is here, the condition of her face made it hard to identify the victim, because maybe the victim looked fairly different when she was still alive. So your thoughts on this whole situation with the prison?
Yeah, well, for the latter question about her appearance, it's just interesting that, as I understand it from the research, these pictures were actually taken not immediately after discovery, but were after the funeral home had already, let's say, altered the state of the body. So, made some changes to her physiology and maybe put some makeup on her.
These are not the ones. In my understanding, these are not the
Okay,
ones. I want to bring in really
yeah.
quickly. We have this picture right here. I thought that this was the
Wow.
one. Yeah. So this was
Okay,
the one.
no, no, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
So in this case, maybe the pictures that you're showing me then are actually a lot more accurate. To your other question, so as I did research here, this it's interesting. Apparently, this was like one of the worst. By worst, I mean toughest, and maybe also like some problems um, in terms of behavior of both the staff and the inmates. Um, this actually housed the death row inmates for the male death row inmates in Texas from 1965 when it was built to 1999. Now, anybody that knows something about Texas knows Texas is notorious for not just having the death penalty, but for for getting for actually doing the death penalty. A lot of other states have the death penalty, and it takes like by the time the person actually gets executed, maybe they're dead already. Like the state I live in, which is the death penalty is almost a joke, but death penalty is not a joke in Texas. But death penalty, you get the death penalty in Texas, you may very well live to see live to see the end of your life in the on death row. Um, so yeah, it is interesting to think like, yeah, how truthful are these guys going to be now? As other people have pointed out in other shows, this was before a lot of the catfishing that goes on the internet now, right? There was no internet. It was harder for somebody to kind of get in contact with a lot of people, but that doesn't mean there weren't pen pals, and that's something I thought about. I was like, well, there are always these programs for a long time for people to get in contact with convicts, and of course convicts have nothing but time, right? So they kind
Yes,
of live for this external contact. It's not always it's not always bad, right? I mean, there's definitely probably some good that can come out of a
of course.
convict talking to people and saying, hey, like, don't live your life like, learn from my bad lesson to not end up like me. People find, like religion and Jesus and things like that, or Muhammad or whatever it is, that they're looking for to kind of figure out why they did the bad things. They have this. That's maybe the curative part of prison for, like you said, the people that actually have a chance of getting out of there. Um, that being said, a lot of these people were people
They're not,
convicted of certain
yeah,
crimes.
the people
Yeah,
that they will not be going out. Okay, that's an excellent
but
clarification. Yeah,
but that being said, I think you make a good point that just because they're in there, just because someone is in there for what seems like a permanent stint, doesn't mean that that's always going to be the case. Now, there's people that have people that have been sentenced to things that look like it was going to be the rest of their lives, and then through legal challenges, case in point, Bill Cosby at the time of this recording just got out of prison on like a technicality where his case was totally overturned and he cannot even be retried for it. So for sure,
whoa,
kind of
seriously?
legal miracles happen. Yeah, yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's funny. It hasn't made as big news as I thought it would be, but yeah. No. Anyways, so yeah, there's definitely, people do find technicalities and things and legal challenges, and it is, I'll even say Rogan always talks about this, the real life, Freeway Rick Ross, not the rapper, but the one the rapper stole the
Yeah,
name
I
from.
know all about that. Yeah,
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 yeah.
that guy, case in point, when literally was illiterate when he went into prison and ended up getting himself out of, what was essentially a lifetime sentence, right? So yeah,
That
it happened.
that's a hustler right there. You know what I mean? I have to
Yeah,
respect the hustler on that
that's
guy.
that's a legit hustle. That's like
Yeah.
a like a legal hustle. I mean, yeah, that literally is going from like nothing to kind of almost becoming a lawyer. So wow.
Yeah, not like that, guys. Yeah, something else. All right. Okay, let's move through what we have next. So I think we hashed out this area. Maybe our audience members may have some interesting points in the comments section. As always, we're looking forward to that. Every single time. Now, I want to quickly jump to another interesting point. Now, all right. So all of the witnesses, and it says the three witnesses. So apparently, in one of these locations, two witnesses, different individual witnesses saw the Jane Doe. I assume they all were asked the question of how to get to that prison. Have all died. Now, I would really like to know when did they all died, and have they died before 2015. And this is gonna be very, very crucial, very important. We will get to it really soon. But like just for the audience members, there's something to think about. All of the people that saw the Jane Doe around Huntsville asking for directions how to get to the prison, they all have died since. But it's very important to know if they died before 2015, which I don't know. Maybe someone in the comments know, and I will explain what I mean by this because this probably makes no sense right now, but I will get to it really shortly. But I just want to follow the chronology of my notes. So, a few points before I get to that. One of the waitresses questioned the girl's age and asked if her parents knew where she was. The victim replied, claiming she was 19, and then she also said in response to whether or not her parents knew where she was going, she said, "Who cares?" So she says she's 19, and then later on in the with like the exhumation of her body for DNA, like 20 years later after this case, they kind of determined that she was in between the ages, I believe, from what does it say, 14 to 20. So she probably didn't lie about her age. I would assume she probably was 19. But now, when asked about her parents, aren't they worried? Do they know where you're at? She's like, who cares? So this is clearly some sort of family drama right there, right?
Yeah, I do. I do wonder though. I mean, from the consensus I was getting was that people thought that maybe she was a minor, and I have to ask you, with these witnesses, I mean, this is kind of a coulda, woulda, shoulda thing. But when it came to this point, like if you're talking to somebody who you think is maybe a minor and you're asking about if your parents know where you are, and maybe some of that's just good old like Southern, you know, concern for your family and being polite and kind of like Southern hospitality, but it did seem like there was concern that maybe there was a minor on the loose and a runaway, and I did kind of wonder. I'm kind of second guessing why didn't they call the police at that point just to report a potential like minor. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like I think at that point, it does
yes.
seem like someone who's on the run, right? They're kind of demonstrating all these weird things going on. For some reason, they want to go to a prison. Like, didn't that ring any alarm bells in anybody's head? Like, what is this maybe not 19-year-old or 18-year-old young lady doing on her own? No form of transportation, hitchhiking, which is illegal, ostensibly. Going to the worst prison in Texas.
Yeah, I mean, probably they did raise some suspicions. That's why they came forward. Maybe it was nothing they could like really do. Maybe they should have contacted law enforcement, of course, in retrospect, but maybe they didn't. But they did keep her in her head, as they thought that this was not gonna end well potentially. Okay, so in 1981. Her remains were buried after the investigation stalled a little bit there. But now in 1999, so let's remember, she is found dead in 1980, 19 years later, her body was exhumed for DNA information and to obtain a clear estimation of the victim's age. Now, the age was approximately between 14 and 20, so it's kind of a wide range, well, maybe not for females, I will say. Maybe not for females, since females develop a lot quicker than males. So maybe it's not that crazy of a range, because for a male, from 14 to like 20, that's like a huge difference. But for a female, obviously a massive difference, but maybe not as big. Now, why I kind of said it's very important for us to know if the witnesses um, were dead before 2015 is because, well, in 2015, two things happened. The first thing happened in November of 2015. The case was officially reopened by the Walker County Sheriff's Office. So they reopened it. But they're kind of hush hush about what they know about this case and the DNA that they do possess. So we can't really make any good guesses there. But in December, so what, like literally the next month, in 2015, a photograph surfaced of a white female aged approximately 14 years of age, standing at 5 feet 4 inches in height, just as the Jane Doe in our case, by the way, and whose other physical characteristics, or maybe just a little bit smaller, I'm sorry, whose other physical characteristics also closely matched those of Walker County Jane Doe. I want to quickly bring out the picture that surfaced in 2015. This is the picture for everyone. This is, and I just want to make this a little bit maybe bigger. So this is the picture, and we're gonna be doing some comparison work on this case. For everyone who's on the YouTube channel, you could like check out the picture. This is the picture that has surfaced, and I have a little write-up on it. I want to also quickly bring out the write-up. I want to read the write-up because this is the note that the person or two people who found this picture left. So just really quickly want to read what this picture is all about that surfaced in 2015. A follower on this page, this is on YouTube by the way, has offered to pay for promotion of this post. So I'm directing this targeted post to residents of Corpus Christi, Texas. Corpus Christi is a small town, kind of next to Huntsville, to be honest. I have it on the map. Okay, so the note says, do you recognize this girl? Her name might be Kathy, Catherine, Katie, or Kathleen. She was 14 years old in 1980 and might have been a runaway from Corpus Christi. The person who gave me this photo explained to me the circumstances of how he met this girl. Some of the details that he gave me about her are amazingly similar to the details and circumstances associated with the story of Walker County Jane Doe, a teenage girl who was murdered on Halloween night 1980 and left alongside Interstate 45 just north of Huntsville, Texas. Walker County Jane Doe remains unidentified to this day. Kathy doesn't look exactly like the artist's depiction of Walker County Jane Doe, but she looks close enough that I cannot rule her out visually as being Walker County Jane Doe. Even if she is not Walker County Jane Doe, we would like to know who she is so we can resolve this question. If you or any of your friends were born around the mid 1960s and went to elementary school or junior high school in Corpus Christi, look at this photo and please private message this page if you recognize her. So we want to do the same. We want to ask for everyone in the audience, if you like went to school in Corpus Christi in around the 1980s. I mean, we might actually have a few listeners from Corpus Christi. Who knows? Like, we have some listeners in Texas for sure. I don't know. Maybe a miracle could happen. Maybe you recognize this girl. The girl I'm referring to is the one on the left. I'm sorry, I kind of should have mentioned this earlier. We're talking about the one on the left side. And now, really quickly, Glenn, before I let you add your thoughts on this, I want to add a few sketches. So this is sketch number 1, made by a sketch artist. This is sketch number 2, made by a sketch artist. Right here. Also want to add the crime scene pictures. Well, let's add this one, because the other one is kind of sideways. So yeah, let's add this one. And yeah, pretty much this is all and this is like the missing people in America, missing persons, exploited persons in America sketch as well. So we have a bunch of sketches, dude. And now I guess we kind of need to look at this because this is the main like thing, I guess, for people who suggested this case for us to do. They want us to do this. I'm sure that this is probably something they want us to do. So I want to quickly add my thoughts and then I'll let you add yours. I don't think, well, I kind of see Kathy, or let's just call her Kathleen. I kind of see Kathleen, this unidentified girl from this picture, looking kind of similar to some of these sketches and kind of similar to the crime scene picture of Walker County Jane Doe. And, you know, it's kind of eerie how her story and her background matches the background of Walker County Jane Doe, according to the witnesses that, spoke to her the day before she was found dead. So, what do you think about this, dude? I'm sure you have some thoughts.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like on one hand, I want to say that the central picture, so the picture of the two girls. I mean, I was if you hadn't told me it was the one on the left, I would have almost said, "Oh yeah, the one on the right does look like the sketches," and kind of. But that's not the one, right? It's the one on the left
Yes.
in the white shirt. So it's either the sketches got it wrong, which is it's interesting because we have like a post-mortem picture. Of course, somebody who's just been beat and who's dead, their face isn't maybe going to look like how they looked in real life, uninjured. But the girl in the white on our left in this picture, to me, her face doesn't really look like the drawings of the person kind of in an ideal state. She does kind of look like the girl in the photo, but I would say the girl in the photo looks sorry, the victim. The victim photo looks younger. This girl, her face looks, in the center here, her face looks a little more robust, and you know what I mean? She looks a little older, and her chin looks stronger. It could just be the lighting. I don't know. What do you think?
I thought it was kind of similar. I thought it was kind of similar because the lips are kind of noticeably swollen on the victim's photo. So we kind of really need to imagine the lips not being like that because that's not natural. That's definitely swollen after severe beating by the culprit. So I think the lips in the victim's picture kind of for a lot of people may make it seem that it's not her, but like let's not discount it completely because the lips are definitely swollen. Also, um I don't know, dude. The hair color matches. um you know what, dude, you know what, before we go into further, I have some more information about the main picture, this big picture right here, the one that we are talking about, with Kathleen in it. I have a little bit of a backstory about this picture, which I think you will be able to make better rational points when I tell you a little bit more about this picture and the audience members as well. So just really quickly, how this picture came to be. So this photograph emerged after a brother and a sister reviewed a private collection of images taken of themselves when they were 12 and 10 at a motel in Bewisle, Texas in the summer of 1980. So quickly, this picture that we're seeing is taken in the summer of 1980, but now the murder victim was killed on Halloween night. So a little bit farther down the line, like a month or maybe a few months down the line. Now, another interesting point is that the siblings had encountered this girl at a motel in question and recall both that she may have lived with a couple at the time the image was taken. Okay, so a couple. So the Jane Doe in our case is kind of being I guess dropped off by a white male from that blue Caprice. So maybe could be one of the one of the people that Kathleen was living with back in the summer of 1980. Who knows? And also Kathleen had expressed her wishes to meet a friend from the Texas State Prison in Sugarland, which is a different prison. So Kathleen expressed going to a Texas State Prison, but a different prison. I have it on the map as well. I'll jump to the map eventually. Also, the sandals. Oh, right, the sandals are a different thing. So yeah, so all of this being said, I want to quickly jump to the map really quick, dude, and you should pay attention because you will maybe get like a better picture of this whole case. So this is where the Jane Doe was found, right? she's she expressed her wishes, the Jane Doe, to go to Ellis Unit right here. She never went there, apparently. Now, in the summer, so like 2 months prior to Jane Doe being found in this location, in the summer of 1980 in Beeville, in this little town right here, which is even smaller, I believe, than Huntsville, the brother and sister, who was 10 and 12, respectively, they were staying at a motel and they met Kathleen, some sort of a girl who was 14, and she was living with some sort of, let's say, couple, and she expressed her wishes to go to the prison in Sugarland. So Sugarland is this area next to Houston. So it's like she kind of expressed to go to a prison, but maybe back in the summer she wasn't clear which prison it was, because it's kind of looking from a BWile's perspective. TJ Ellis unit is kind of just a little bit further past Sugarland, so maybe she wasn't sure. And now, also, I kind of forgot to mention the witnesses in Huntsville, the ones that talked to the Jane Doe, both recall that the Jane Doe told them that she was from somewhere in Rockport or Arkansas Pass in in Texas, so these areas. But now in BWile, Kathleen said that she's from Corpus Christi, which is literally next to Arkansas Pass and Rockport. So literally the same location, same area. So it's like, I don't know, dude, looking at the map, I kind of see like a very eerie connection. And just like literally, I just had like kind of shivers all over my body just by looking at this map once more, because it according to me, dude, I don't know, this girl may be the Walker County Jane Doe. I mean, I don't know. To me, it seems like it's a definite possibility now.
What's the distance between the Sugarland prison though and the Ellis prison? I mean, you know what I mean? On a map, it can look
from the
close.
distance.
Yeah.
Give me a second. So as the crow fly, right? So as the crow fly, it's 88.5 miles. Now, if we would drive there, I would easily bet it's upwards to 100 miles.
Okay, but that's not hundreds of miles. That's not
Nope.
It's not as much as I'd imagine. So when you said Houston, I was like, oh, I feel like Houston's pretty far from that, but I think I was wrong. I mean, they're both kind of easily within, driving range of the coast. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's, on one hand, it's not so unusual for, let's say, wayward teens to have some kind of fascination with, maybe, especially back then, right? We're talking about still kind of coming out of the 70s. I don't know. I mean, it's so interesting when you look at some of these awful people that are in jail for horrible crimes, and they'll have all this. They'll have like these groupies, no joke, like this kind of fan club of people that want to correspond with them. Often, like women who, even horrible people like the Night Stalker, like Richard Ramirez and Ted Bundy and all these people that, they even get married in jail because they have these people that are fascinated with them. So on one hand, I almost wonder, without getting on my kick about the media and all this other stuff, but yeah, there's, on one hand, maybe I don't find it that weird that more than one kind of teen girl from the same demographic that looks similar to each other could have a fascination with prisoners. Now, the timing, like you said, and the geolocation do make it seem like less of a coincidence. The one thing is, I was wondering real quick, and this is going to be more for the benefit of our YouTubers than our podcast listeners, would it be possible to bring up that second photo of the corpse?
The one where she's in the open casket?
No, not the postmortem. So you have two of them that are kind of from the same time, this ID purposes
It's
only.
it's very
Yeah,
it's very it's very small. That's the thing that we can't.
yeah. It's
Well, we
well,
can,
yeah.
we can, we
Wonder
can.
if you could
Yeah,
zoom it in and then zoom in the one in the center
yeah.
as well. I know it's kind of hard. I don't know if you can do it
I can do it. I can do it.
easily.
It's easily.
Yeah,
It's not
because
that hard.
I know when you and I were doing our kind of pre-show
Yeah.
um, planning, I felt like at that point, to me, it did look like more possible. I mean, it's tough because the chin, some of it could be just the lighting and stuff because we're talking about two different sets of lighting, obviously, and that can make a big difference on depth perception. Like you said, her lips could look a lot more swollen here for obvious reasons because she got punched in the face a bunch of times. Um, I don't know why the chin looks so much stronger to me, and then the nose looks more. You know what? But it's really tough. And then the other thing I was looking at was the eyebrows. But of course, like this being a couple months before her death, she could have been picking her eyebrows, plucking her eyebrows more.
Yeah.
Because the eyebrows, you notice in the white shirt girl's picture, the eyebrows are a lot less significant. So maybe she was plucking her eyebrows a lot more
The
back
quality of that
then.
picture is not ideal.
It's not super. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. You do see some kind of necklace.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You see,
Also, I want to
which,
quickly add.
yeah,
I also want to quickly add that apparently, let's remember that the Jane Doe came from a middle class family, had a very good dental history. Now, from this picture, the teeth look really good on
yeah,
uh, on Kathleen, and also I know she's kind of looking really tidied up. She looks, she definitely looks like she's coming from a good family. I think,
looks healthy. Yeah, yeah. And I was trying to look at like the ears and the hairline, and it's real tough, because I mean, it's not out of the question.
Yes.
I guess when you look at this photo, I mean, even the nose is passably the same. So I can see, I mean, I have to say, I'm touched that somebody went to the trouble to do that targeted Facebook ad in kind of an intelligent way to try to get to the bottom of this. You know what I mean? When you look at it and you're like, wow, look at this like,
But now I
yeah,
have I have a really important question for you that we have. It's like an elephant in the room. The 10-year-old and 12-year-old brother and sister uh, went through pictures 35 years later. So imagine being the 12-year-old and 35 years later. So you are now what, 50? No, I'm sorry, 47, right? 35 plus 12, that's 47, right? So you're now a 47-year-old person and you remember back exactly this
yeah,
woman when you were 12. Now you're 47. You go through family albums and you're like, oh, remember her? And this is happening 1 month after the the investigation was reopened. 1 month after. I don't know if there's a reward connected to this, but I guess you kind of see my drift here a little bit, right?
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, by the way, it could go either way, right? It could be like, yeah, there's a motive, so maybe that kind of affects your memories. But then also, like, even without the reward, how reliable? Yeah, how reliable is your? Because I'll tell you, I always thought that I had really good memories about things like this, and then I'll even find myself misremembering things that like I had told myself over and over in my memory, and I swore that I had the right story, and then like there'll be something definitive where it's like, oh no, you don't remember it that the exact way it happened. Whether it was like a movie, like my favorite movie, or things like that. Yeah, so yeah, no, I mean, to your point, it could just be a wild coincidence and maybe like a little bit of after the fact distortion of memories. But yeah, I mean, it's too bad that like at least us getting it out there and everyone else getting it out there, if someone recognizes themselves in this photo, will like for that person to speak up and say, "Oh no, that was me. I was on vacation with my parents," and like it's just to clear the air. I'm still alive. I'm not this dead person. It is useful still for them to put this out there, right? Yeah.
Exactly. At this point, this person from the picture would be, let me do the quick math. It's 2021. This happened in 80, so that's 41 years
Oh
ago. The
yeah.
person was 14. So now a woman from Chris Christie who is 55 could come forward and tell us if she is the person in question. Now, without stopping here for too long, I want to quickly jump because I kind of already told everyone there's one man that I think could be potentially linked, because literally okay, the other last point about this case is that the sandals, remember the sandals that were found next to her body? Well, the sandals found at the scene were later tested for traces of DNA, but now the results have yet to be released. So the sandals might be the bright spot that we need in this case. We don't know what's on the sandals. There might be nothing there, but there might be something crucial, because they did reopen the investigation in 2015. Why would they do that? I think maybe because there's something potentially on those sandals or somewhere else in the scene that they think that they could use DNA to trace that stuff. Now I want to quickly talk about a man called Mike de Bradelben. Mike de Bradelben. Something like that. It's a crazy name. So let's just call him, and he's called James. Oh yeah, so his nickname is Mike, but he is James Mitchell de Bradelben. Literally, this is his name. It's the craziest last name I've ever heard in my life. Now, his story is that this man, James, is a suspected American serial killer whose modus operandi is frighteningly close to how the Walker County Jane Doe was killed. And I think, and this is coming from a Reddit post, and I think he could be a viable suspect in her case. He was arrested on multiple abduction and rape charges and is known to be responsible for at least one murder, although he was never convicted. He was known to raped and sodomized women with objects, just like in the Walker County Jane Doe case. He admitted to fantasizing about abducting and killing a woman via strangulation, just like the Jane Doe, and attempted to strangle one victim before banging her head into the floor until she passed out. A possible final link is that he stripped at least one of his victims, and the Jane Doe was also found with no clothes. Now, in 1979, just a year before the Walker County Jane Doe was found dead, James also picked up a young woman off the highway. I'm not sure which highway though. This is very important. It doesn't say here, and I looked into it. I don't know if it's the same highway or not. So he picks up a woman off a highway, a young woman, then pretended to be a police officer. So this was clearly the way he found at least of his victims. Okay, I don't know why they said like that, but he pretended to be a police officer, raped, I assume, this young woman, but she survived. And then in November 1980, he kidnapped and raped one known victim. So on the same year, he kidnapped and raped one known victim and attempted to do the same to another woman, although I'm not sure where this took place. I know this is all speculation, but I think the Walker County Jane Doe has been unidentified for so long that anything is worth considering at this point. Please let me know if you think this could be a possibility. Thanks. Now, he has a Wikipedia, so if you would just type in James Mitchell Debradelben Jr., he was he was a known as a mall passer, which means that he was a counterfeiter as well. He would counterfeit $20 bills, and now the United States Secret Service, back in the day, they believed that they had found a geographical pattern to string a bunch of counterfeiting cases together, and they kind of made a composite sketch and gave it to clerks in stores. and they kind of led to the arrest of James. And now, during his arrest, they were kind of looking for his machinery that he was using to counterfeit $20 bills, but they found something a lot more horrific because initially he was booked only for the counterfeit. No one thought that he was a rapist and a murderer, but now, with like, as they were looking for machinery during the search for the equipment, photographs, okay, were found depicting the rapes and murders of women. FBI profilers speculate that in photographs where his face is seen alongside with the victims, he murdered the woman and disposed of her body. Now, whereas in photographs where he is hiding his face, he allowed the victim to live, okay? So James represented himself in court and was convicted of multiple crimes and sentenced to 375 years in federal prison. All right, so this is insane. The guy was also displayed schizoid and narcissistic traits as well. So he was like unstable, but now he took pictures. So just quickly, how this crazy man connects to this case. He took pictures of like the victims, and if he showed his face in the picture, that means that the victim was most likely killed and buried somewhere. But now if he doesn't show his face in the picture, is hiding his face, then probably the victim is still alive. He just raped them and let them go. So this guy is insane, completely crazy. So how does this connect to this case? Because obviously the police would have already looked at those pictures to see if any of the victims found in his like photo album of his crazy crimes connect to the Jane Doe, and I kind of guess that nothing was found. So I would assume that the Jane Doe wasn't part of his like creepy photo album. So I guess your thoughts, could he be potentially connected? I don't think so, but it's a thought, you know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll save it for my little rant at the end. But it's interesting that the MO matches in terms of how he would assault his victims and some of his, let's say, obsessions. Um, I mean, can you imagine? uh, Think how much harder it was to like take a picture of things and take a picture of yourself back then. Can you imagine this guy with a camera phone now?
Um, all right, so I think the questions and my notes are kind of done. I kind of want to quickly go through my theories, and then yeah, as I've said, I think you have some really deep, good points. Really quickly, the theories. Obviously, I don't know what happened. I just kind of really want to know if anyone could recognize themselves in the Kathleen picture. As I've said, at this point, the woman would be 55, hailing from Chris Christie. So if anyone knows a 55-year-old woman who's from Chris Christie, and kind of, you know, at least her pictures as a young teenager looks similar to Kathleen's picture, please contact the authorities and let them know that you potentially know who Kathleen is in that picture. Now, the theories are that the Walker County Jane Doe may have been killed by the same man as Deborah Jackson. So Deborah Jackson was previously known as Orange Socks. She was a Jane Doe who was identified. Now, Orange Socks, otherwise as Deborah Jackson, was found around the same day a year before Walker County Jane Doe was murdered. Both were strangled, sexually assaulted, and left nude by a highway, except for footwear. Now, Henry Lee Lucas confessed to killing Deborah Jackson, but later recanted it because apparently nothing really matched up. Like his whole stuff didn't match up to Orange. Like what he was telling the cops kind of didn't match up to what they found at the crime scene. Henry Lee Lucas at that time was working in Florida the day Jackson was murdered, so it's like he was in a different state, not in Texas. Lucas confessed to thousands of murders in the country that he did not commit. So probably didn't commit Orange Sock's murder as well, resulting in a coalition of detectives or for fame, whatever. Now, another theory indicates that the Walker County Jane Doe could be one of the 4 other victims, and this was crazy to me when I was looking into this. Now, according to this theory, Walker County Jane Doe could be one of 4 victims. The list included Harris County Jane Doe from October 1980 and Harris County Jane Doe from December 10th, 1980. So 2 other Jane Does from Harris County left alongside Interstate 45 along the same interstate. Each victim was strangled, and some were victims of sexual assault, and a third potential victim's body has since been identified, also left alongside Interstate 45. Now, the existence of the so-called Interstate 45 killer has never been proven, but like there's been a bunch of Jane Does alongside Interstate 45. So there could be like a serial killer operating in, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s alongside Interstate 45, you know? So 2 theories. I don't really have anything else to add. I kind of just really want to know if someone could identify Kathleen in that picture. That's all. That's where I'm gonna leave it at, dude. And yeah, have at it.
Okay, yeah. I want to apologize a little bit in advance because I feel like I'm gonna go on a little bit of a stream of consciousness rant, and I'm gonna go through my thoughts and questions, and I'm gonna inject a little bit of Glennisms in there. Is that okay?
All
I'm
good,
just
man.
gonna,
Perfect.
yeah. So strap yourselves in. I have some thoughts. Okay, so one of the things that kind of occurred to me was that maybe this is a long-term societal issue, but there's like a real issue with runaways where on one hand it's like everybody would love to see someone who's run away from home return to their home and to their loved ones. And it seems like there's always an issue of them not being taken very seriously, right? This was a big problem with law enforcement for a long time, and still now. I mean, sometimes we've run into this time after time again in our episodes where someone disappears and law enforcement kind of blows it off for the first couple of days. In a lot of our cases, because they're like, well, this happens a lot. Someone gets mad at their parents or their family and they run off, and then they'll show up again, or maybe they won't. And a lot of times, in our cases, they don't show up; they just completely disappear. And it's tough because sometimes, like, the person does have a good reason for running away. There's a famous movie called Hardcore, where like George C. Scott, who's a famous actor, he's playing like this dad whose daughter like runs off, and then she appears in like an adult film that he just randomly sees in like a movie theater, and the whole rest of the movie is about him trying to track her down, and he actually recruits someone else who's like an adult actress to help him try to track her down. And she's like, listen, just so that this isn't a big shock to you, but she very well may not want to come home. And often like that's the case, like the person doesn't want to come home and he's kind of like in denial about that. So okay, that's what I'm saying is, it is interesting too, because sometimes people are running away because there is something really bad going on at home. But I think what's different about this case is that unlike for instance, one of the people she was compared to was someone that died just like her. This victim's name was Orange Socks for 40 years, because they didn't know who she was until just really recently, where they finally were able to identify her. But unlike Orange Socks, who was kind of in physically bad condition, had like gonorrhea infection, and like toenails and fingernails weren't clipped, and some amount of dirt and scars and things like that. Up until the point where she died, our Jane Doe looked to have been a kind of a well cared for child and maybe young adult. So, wasn't showing maybe the signs of abuse that someone else who was on the road, like bruises and maybe other things, like broken bones and things that were
Yeah.
signs of long term, malnutrition, etc. wasn't there. Even still had like jewelry, had all her teeth. I mean, gosh, that's who could ask for more back then. Okay, so that was just some of the things I noticed. Maybe that maybe why people obsess about this so much is that it seems like someone's missing a child, right?
Yeah.
So that begs some questions coming up here. Okay, before I get to kind of the like I said, the elephant in the room, um, do you think is it possible that the girl at the truck stop is just coincidental? That this somehow this some dead girl, it doesn't seem like it's possible, but that this girl who was asking all these questions, um, you know, how do I get to the prison? Saying she doesn't care about, what her parents think, etc. Is it possible it's not the same girl? That this is some kind of red herring?
Um, I don't know. Some sources are like really strong, like the link according to them is like really strong here, and like
Yeah,
three witnesses all describing the same, and they were clearly shown. Let's remember, there's no way that the police didn't show them the pictures. I mean, the pictures are
yeah,
there for the public to see, so they saw the pictures, and all three of them, none of them kind of said, "Oh no, no, she didn't look like that," and she kind of looked like, and I mean, it kind of looks like, and also the last place that she was is only 3.5 miles, like, and accordingly very easily to get you along the interstate. You know, I know. I feel like, and she apparently never turned up to the girl that was asking for directions never did turn up to the Ellis unit. So it's
yeah.
like, if I had to bet my money, I would definitely bet that Jane Doe is the same girl that was dropped off from that blue Caprice. But I can see that. I'm not saying that it's impossible that she's not. Obviously, everything's possible.
Right. We should ask the question, but I think you're right. Yeah. That it does seem like there's a overall consensus
Yeah.
that the witnesses were accurate, and like remember, we're not talking about downtown New York or Chicago or Los Angeles, etc. We're talking about an area that probably doesn't see a lot of homicides. So
Mm,
yeah, it doesn't, what I mean? And she was walking along the Yellow Brick Road. There's only kind of one or two main roads. So this girl who was asking all these questions and sort of out of place on the Yellow Brick Road shows up dead a couple miles down the Yellow Brick Road. Looks a lot like her. Seems like it's probably the same person. Okay.
yeah.
Um, I think I already went over my concerns about whether they should have called the police at that point when this person was kind of showing unhealthy behaviors and look to be in. I guess it's water under the bridge now, but it is worth maybe in the future, see something, say something, right? So, just that's a point. The Ellis Prison Farm, yeah, I'm still not sure like how much of what her stated destination was like a red herring. We already talked about would the prisoners have even been honest about it. Now, one of the things that was interesting, this ties both into like maybe the idea of there being a who the suspects could be was like, well, maybe someone who worked at the prison overheard this conversation in the truck stop, the diner, and sort of realized there was an opportunity. And since they knew exactly where she was headed, could have had the opportunity to kind of take their time without looking suspicious, like leaving right after her. This is Stephanie Harlow's kind of one of her main theories on her show, and could have used the opportunity to ambush her, or otherwise you convince her to go with them, and then sort of understand that this person wouldn't have had anybody looking for her after they did what they did to her.
Mm.
Um,
Wait,
okay,
wait,
but then,
wait, just
yeah.
really quickly, because I have to ask, why would this person be working at the prison then? How is this connected to the?
Yeah, well, because so you figure this is the major metropolitan area near the prison. So if you're working in that prison, you may very well either live in that area or have to stop by that area to like, get lunch, wait for your shift. Just a lot of the
Oh, right,
infrastructure for
right,
those
right.
prisons,
I
you know
get
what I
it.
mean?
But it's
So
it's
then,
kind of it's kind of just to add, it's kind
yeah,
of interesting contrast how like the prison worker at like a really serious death row prison would kind of also be really edging to get inside of the prison as an inmate potentially.
Well, so yeah, you know what I'll do is I'll take that part of my spiel and just move it up. So yeah, like it is a good point because you think often in people's minds a prison what's like a prison guard would be synonymous with a police officer, but that isn't actually the case. So of course we know people in authority are not infallible, and there's for sure been criminal people in law enforcement, where like there's that kind of thin line between good and evil sometimes. But actually, in many cases, people that work in prisons are not necessarily at all at the same level as like a law enforcement officer in a major metropolitan area. Often the requirements can be quite low because it's a job that's hard to fill. Um, so and it goes probably without saying, I'm going to say it anyway, that a lot of crime goes on at prisons from the guards themselves. That there's a lot of, like, this is part of how all these drugs and things get smuggled into the prisons. Is that prison guards are very low paid in a lot of these places. They're very not that well trained necessarily in some states, and I think at some point, if your peers are essentially these really horrible people that you're guarding, it's not inconceivable that you might start to bond with dysfunctional people and start to get an interest or an unhealthy obsession. This, once again, I have to say I'm channeling Stephanie Harlow a little bit here, but also just from my own readings. Yeah, that it's not inconceivable that someone might actually start to almost become like a fan or obsessed of the same kind of thing, and maybe even develop like a weird thing where you're like, hey, do you know what I did? Like, guess what I did the
Yeah,
other night? You know what I mean? So
yeah.
it's interesting. And it's something that, at first when I heard the theory, I was like, I don't know. But then the more I thought about it and kind of reviewed it past stuff I've read, I'll just say that's kind of in my book now. Okay, I'll just get through the rest of these. One of the other questions I had, well, oh sorry, on the prison though, the other thing was maybe the victim didn't actually know somebody at the prison, but was using the prison as a landmark for someone that she knew living nearby. You know what I mean?
Not
So
really, but it's
so
interesting.
let's say like, your uncle Bill or Aunt Mary, they live
Oh,
like a
yep, yep,
stone's
yep, yep.
throw, you know what I
Oh,
mean?
sorry. Yeah,
So you're like,
oh,
you go to the prison, well, you're at Aunt Mary's house because Aunt Mary is right down the street from, you know what I mean? So then it's like you're not really going to go to the prison, you're going like right nearby it. So that was interesting. I thought that was like
it seems like
a
there's not that much, or maybe there is.
houses and stuff. Yeah,
There is.
just a little bit. Yeah, there's a little community there. Um, it's probably a good place to open a convenience store, right? Because you got all these prison guards and people. You need milk, um, or
Exactly.
beer.
That's a good
There it
point.
is. Yeah, that's
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 a
the
good
place
point.
to open your. Yeah, of course, when someone escapes, that's where they're also going to head to. Okay, so it was interesting. Um, and then, of course, the question is like, how would you know someone there? Well, it's a good question. It could be somebody that they knew before they got locked up, and they has fond memories, and just the person might not have even known that she was looking for them, and that she even knew them. Who knows? There's a lot of ways we could speculate. Now, one of the things that I had wondered was I was like, okay, they have DNA samples. Why didn't they do what they did in like, for those of us going way back to our Golden State Killer episode? One of the things that was breakthrough about that was they took DNA, and instead of matching it to somebody that was in the database, they matched it to somebody who was related to the killer. So what happens is these things like 23andMe, at some point they were publicly searchable by law enforcement. Now there's been some laws, unfortunately, which drives me crazy because we're gonna do privacy to help criminals, but whatever. Okay, so but before that, like you could do this weird kind of triangulation with DNA. This is like a really new thing from the past 5-10 years, and you could actually find somebody who was close enough to the DNA sample to probably be a relative of the actual killer. And then you would do a little more research and say, well, like, what's this family tree look like? and then find somebody who would kind of fit like, oh, they're about the right age, they were alive, and old
Yeah.
enough to have actually done the crime, and then you would secretly take a test from there, like you would find like a used coffee cup that they threw away in a trash can or something and test it, and bam, you got them. That's what happened with the Golden State Killer. Well, the answer was that they didn't actually get enough DNA evidence the first couple of times, and long story short, because of budgetary concerns and stuff like that, it would probably take like a Kickstarter or some kind of like private effort to get her once again disinterred, get the body exhumed, retested, etc. It's going to cost money, and we're for sure in kind of a cash-strapped era where they're not necessarily looking to spend tens of thousands of dollars to solve, 40-year-old crimes as much as all of us would like to see that happen. Um, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean it can't happen. Like it could happen. But it's going to mean maybe people ponying up some cash, and maybe that's like a good Kickstarter for someone to do. Okay, and then finally, yeah. I mean, my other question is before I get to just rip through the theories real quick, which most of which I think you've already covered. Um, yeah, where are the parents? Like, so it's, people ask kind of a lot of different questions. Are like, well, could she have been a foster child? Doesn't She seemed like she was in a little better shape than the foster child, but like, yeah, things aren't really that well tracked now in foster child programs, and even back then, especially back then, it just seems weird that someone's kid is missing, someone's kid who seems well taken care of, and no one's ever said, "Hey, where the hell's my daughter?"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then like matched it up, and it's not for lack of effort because the authorities have gone back to the places where they thought she was from and said, "Hey, is anybody missing a kid or a teenager or a daughter?" They searched high school yearbooks from a lot of different places. They really put a lot of effort to try to match,
Mm.
a family with a dead child, and or a dead offspring, and didn't happen. So that that's troubling to me in a lot of ways, because you could see that happening to like somebody whose family didn't care for them and who was raised by animals, but this doesn't seem to be the case for this person. So what the hell happened here? Okay, and then I'm just going to finish this off before I get into my end of thing rant. Henry Lee Lucas, where he talked about him. Prison guard did it. Talked about that. Um, Now I will add in the trucker theory, which to me is one of the strongest theories, at least for who could have done it, because you've got a place that has a lot of trucker traffic. It seems clear to me that if there was any place to take this girl from someone who didn't live in the area, well, a trucker with a big sleeper cab, and maybe enticing the person. Oh, why don't you? I'll give you a ride. Why don't you come over here? And we just aren't you tired? Let's go. It somehow got our Jane Doe away from prying eyes, and then beat her into submission, and then did all sorts of other horrible things.
Quickly, you
And
just to
yeah,
interject. It kind of your theory makes a lot of sense because let's remember she was already, according to us, doing a lot of hitchhiking. So it's like
yeah.
it's almost like she was risking her life every single time, and maybe this time she shouldn't have risked it.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I think that seems very likely. And the fact that, she was found in I mean, the person didn't even pull off the road, you know what I mean? Didn't even pull off of the beaten path. Maybe because it would have been more suspicious for a truck to be down some weird road, you know what I mean? Versus like a car of a resident. A car of a
Yes.
resident could be anywhere in town, but you drag that big 18-wheeler
Mm.
down some country lane, and all of a sudden you're like, well, what are you doing, trucker? Like those oranges got to be in Arkansas tomorrow. What are you doing over here? So yeah, that to me matches, and the kind of the means, let's say, to
Yes.
do it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then finally, in terms of addressing like, well, where could this girl have come from? This young lady have come from, being in the kind of the good shape she was, and maybe being mad at her family and not caring. Well, this also came from a couple different shows, including Stephanie Harlow. There was this this bunch of like kind of like reform schools run by a kind of a culty um, fundamental Baptist movement guy named Lester Roloff. He's a little bit infamous for that state. He had a lot of legal issues back and forth with the state about his schools and some of his other practices.
Texas?
But yeah, in Texas. Yeah, in Texas, and I think maybe the other maybe adjoining states. But this guy, I mean, this guy, he has a whole Wikipedia page just about him, and he had a lot of legal battles with the state about these schools he ran because the schools were really restrictive and invasive of privacy. And it was interesting because it wasn't just so it was like if you had a teenager and your teenager was giving you problems, you could send them to this school, and this school was kind of like a little prison in a way. But it was like the only literature you could read was like the King James Holy Bible, and it was really restrictive. But it wasn't necessarily just even seen for bad kids. It was like if you had parents that were really like, I don't know, man, really, really conservative and really wanted you to like, really got sold by this guy and like, this is the way you're going to raise your kid right. Well, then you might put your not bad kid also in this school, but then your kid might end up hating you for it. So that was the theory, was that maybe she ran away from one of these places and that school was embarrassed and like didn't want to admit it. Um, and this might have been why she was on the run, but nobody was really looking for her. Um, but then she was also mad at her parents. It doesn't answer why her parents never finally said, "Hey, what happened to my kid?" And then,
And also,
connected the dots.
and
Yeah.
also doesn't add to the fact that she had a strong inclination to go to a prison for some reason.
I mean, maybe the one thing I was, well, yeah, it doesn't exactly say it, other than maybe that instinct to go the complete opposite direction of where people were pushing you. That's the only thing I can, to
Yeah,
really
yeah.
rebel. So that would be the one, like I'm gonna show mom and dad, I'm gonna I'm gonna marry a convict. Yeah, I don't know, that was my other thing. So I mean, I guess coming into like the bringing it home, like I said, I really am leaning towards the trucker. Some trucker doing it. It is interesting, as Stephanie Harlow, some other people have noted. This was a weird era. I don't think it's the only era like this, but I think because of changing societal mores, where like maybe it was more acceptable, not just for young people, but women especially, to kind of go out on their own and do like what were kind of unconventional things, and like kind of this rebel thing that was coming out of the 60s and 70s about rebelling against society, and doing like these unconventional paths, that maybe some amount of like the hitchhiking for sure was tolerated, and some of this like running away and kind of hippie type stuff was still kind of tolerated even going into the conservative 80s. So what they pointed out was, because DNA evidence hadn't really happened yet, it was this weird golden era for like serial killers. And it wasn't like there was just one or two of them. This was a big problem, and maybe it always was a problem, but it was an era where maybe there was like more victims kind of available than usual because of these weird kind of cultural habits in America, and people kind of leaving home and being in unsafe situations. And like it is kind of backfiring on some of these people now, where like some of these cold cases do get solved, and these monsters that did these horrible crimes suddenly have to pay for something they did in like 1975 or 78 or 83 that they never thought they would, because back then it was like literally if you didn't do it in front of a a camera or a witness, you could kind of get away with it if you didn't leave too much evidence and you had a plausible motive, and it could convince a stupid jury, like in our Girl Scout murders
Yeah.
case, just ignorant people, or biased people, that you didn't do it because well, no one saw me do it, even though all the evidence pointed to you. It's interesting, like, uh, and I say there was a lot of frustration with this. Um, for anybody that ever watches, like, I would say Dirty Harry or Death Wish or any of like there's a reason why all these movies about like vigilantes doing stuff to criminals came out during this period, because there was a lot of frustration. There was a massive crime rate coming out of the 50s, 60s, and going into the early 80s. Crime was essentially peaking. I think it didn't peak until like the 90s, and then started going down again for reasons which we can discuss another time. But it's interesting to think that, like, yeah, there was like kind of this epidemic of people having really dysfunctional behavior, And some of these people you can see why, but it really makes you wonder, like where were all the sources of this dysfunctional behavior, and then the fact that
Yeah.
there weren't enough resources to catch them, and then maybe they were being helped by these cultural changes, that were happening in society. Um, I think I'm not that surprised, I guess, given that, for what the horrible stuff people can do and where they get bad ideas from. But it just baffles me in closing that, you know, unlike the other cases we've had where like someone goes missing and their family is like, where are they? Right. But here we have somebody,
Yep.
yeah, there's nobody,
There's no one there.
claiming it, and
Yeah.
it isn't like somebody where, yeah, it looks like there was a reason why because they were abusing them or, bad stuff's going on in the household. That doesn't look like that here. This person wasn't doing the behaviors like you would expect somebody running from like maybe sexual abuse in their household to like maybe be more amenable to like prostitution or something like that, to kind of like because they've been conditioned to use their body to get what they want, and they're sort of like the barriers are down psychologically. But that wasn't the case here, right? I mean, there's nothing about this person that fits that profile. So maybe that's why this case is so enduring. I really hope, per what you said, earlier, and what we were talking about, that maybe there will be some effort to try to triangulate, even if it takes private dollars to, lay this case to rest.
Yeah, dude, that's an excellent spiel. There's a lot of really good information actually that I didn't really think about. So yeah, guys, I think Glenn pretty much laid it out a lot better than I did in terms of like the theories and the closing points, because I wasn't aware of definitely most of these things. Leave your thoughts in the comment section if you have any, guys. We're gonna be closing this week's show. Definitely an interesting show this week. Something to think about, and if we just in a very minute way helped push forward the final conclusion on the Walker County Jane Doe case, then that's definitely worth it in my opinion. This is the type of case where I don't I feel really happy about doing, because I feel like there's a purpose for this, for our podcast and for this case. There's a real purpose here to talk about this case, and I think we fulfilled I guess that end of our duty, I guess, as being true crime podcasters, as best as we could, to the best of our abilities. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining us this week. We will catch you on the next week's episode. Have a wonderful rest of the week. I hope everyone is healthy and doing fine, and we will catch you next week with some more very fascinating cases. Thank you all, and stay safe. Peace out.